2NURFM.com, a broadcast service of the University of Newcastle.
But the lucky country, of course, has just had a change of leadership, and we're joined now by our politics guru, Jim Jose. Jim, has there been a change of mood in the electorate since last Wednesday's event, our change of Prime Minister?
Well, according to the range of opinion polls over the past few days, yes, there has been. How reliable that is as a barometer of actual change in terms of voting patterns, the polls have been relatively accurate in the past, at least in the 2010 election. So it remains to be seen just how buoyant that change of mood is, but there's certainly a sense within the Labor Party perhaps that they're trying to project at least that they now have it all together. They've got a new focus, that they may be in with a chance, and come election day, whenever that might be now, since September 14 is likely to be cancelled as the potential election day because of the Prime Minister's view that it's a Jewish holiday and therefore inappropriate for an election date, and that's sort of fair enough, but exactly where the date will shift to, whether it will come closer to where we are or whether it will move further away, at this stage it's not clear, but Kevin Rudd's making noises about, for example, taking Tony Abbott with him to the G20 summit in Russia, which is in early October, I think. I'm not exactly sure of the date, which would suggest that he's looking to be Prime Minister at least until October. And there is some logic to that, if you like, in the sense that he expands the time with which he has to operate in to push the opposition into nervous mistakes. It's not clear exactly how the opposition is going to cope with the new Rudd, with the Rudd government and its new ministry. At the moment, the comments from Julie Bishop are, in some senses, the obvious and predictable way of dealing with it. She's reported as describing the new ministry and the Rudd government, Kevin Rudd's report supporting, I think was the word, disloyalty and deceit and so forth, because he's actually got in his cabinet people who were anti-Rudd supporters or pro-Gillard supporters. This would seem to me, if it's the case that he's trying to build a united front and project a party for the next election as united and coherent, then you would expect that he would in fact draw into his cabinet and the outer ministry some of his political enemies, or at least those who weren't on his side when the numbers were being counted. This would seem to be good politics within the Labor Party, at least in the short term, because if they need to sustain a sense of unity when they go to the polls. So it's a sort of obvious comment on the part of Julie Bishop to sort of highlight the disloyalty and deceit within the party, but I think it's a very thin thing to say and biding time. And why I say biding time is because I think that then the opposition is not quite sure how to handle the change situation. Up until last Wednesday, Tony Abbott had reinvented himself as the statesman-like leader of the Liberal Party and hence the coalition, and a potential Prime Minister. So he was projecting himself quite successfully, I think, into that space. Now that Kevin Rudd has resurfaced and is occupying that space, he too is projecting himself as a new man, as the new politician, and that he's learned his lesson. And he will be looking for ways to wrong foot Tony Abbott. And so I think that the opposition are still trying to get, in a sense, the new Rudd, the measure of the new Rudd, rather than the old one. And at this stage, Kevin Rudd is playing it very cautiously and handing out all the olive branches, shall we say, not just simply to his political opponents within the party, but he's made overtures to the Business Council and more or less confirmed that the Business Council's view of the former Gillard government, which was a political view rather than the reality, but Kevin Rudd, by suggesting that he meets with them, that he listens to what they have to say, He's making noises about the carbon tax, although whether they become more substantive than just simply noises remains to be seen. That these sort of developments, Jane, are difficult to know exactly how they will actually unfold in reality. But at this stage, we can suggest that the Rudd government, and Kevin Rudd in particular, is trying very hard to be not simply the born-again Prime Minister, but to actually bring as many people on side as he can. Now, the risk for him is that he may well find that October is going to be too far away and that he loses his footing along the way. And that's what Tony Abbott will be trying to make sure happens. At the same time, as I said, Kevin Rudd will be trying to make sure that it happens to Tony Abbott. The question mark which remains to be addressed is if Kevin Rudd continues to be successful and continues to hold his own in the polls, and he's already outstripping Tony Abbott as preferred Prime Minister, will the nervous people in the Liberal Party turn around and decide that maybe Tony Abbott isn't the best bet to lead them into the polls? At the moment, my best guess would be no, they won't move in that direction, because that will then undermine their current attempts to portray the Labor Party as the party of dysfunction and disunity, disloyalty, deceit and all things evil.
Which they've been condemning all the way along.
Exactly. So it would seem to me that politically that's not a viable strategy. And I think that Tony Abbott can take heart in many ways from the fact that his success as leader of the opposition has forced the Labor Party to change its leader yet again. And I think that that's the line, the political line that Tony Abbott will hold, and make sure that everybody gets to hear that. If he hasn't already begun to utter it, I'm sure the party strategists within the coalition will be uttering it. We have a new Prime Minister precisely because the best Prime Minister in waiting forced the government to change direction, to change its leadership, to change its ministry. This leader of the coalition has forced out of office competent ministers, basically. So I think that for the Liberal Party, for the coalition, they would be very unwise, and I don't think they will do it anyway. Tony Abbott will lead them into the election and will be trying to make as much mileage as possible. And given the way that some media response and some commentaries have emerged, it's not going to be easy for Kevin Rudd at all. There's a lot of, shall we say, critical mass or criticisms of the government at present. So we wait and see. But my guess is, Jane, that the coalition is not going to get I guess what they call it in the football parlance, the collywobbles. I suspect that Tony Abbott will hold his own and keep his team in line just long enough to go to the election, and it'll be an interesting contest, shall we say.
Certainly will be, all the way from now until whenever it is. And there's so much more we could talk about it. We'll have to leave some of it. Yes. At any rate. There'll be more next week, next Tuesday.
Every day.
Thanks, Jim Joes, for joining us.
Thank you, Jane.
2NURFM.